Hey, hello, hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, what's up?
Not much, just finishing out the week, basically.
Okay, well
How were
that's
the
cool.
debates?
Um, pretty good, I guess. Just
Yeah,
the third Democratic debate. Nothing too exciting, I don't think happened. There were no huge moments or anything, so or at least I don't think.
yeah, it was kind of blah
No.
after a few debates already.
Mm-hmm.
Just too bad Tulsi wasn't there.
The Queen. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess.
Okay. So real quick, introduce yourself to chat. Who are you? What's up?
Oh, sure. Hey, chat. It's my first time. I'm a debate virgin, I guess. Basically, I run a company that has 7 million users around the planet.
17-month
We're trying to
anniversary.
convert
17
the
next
feudalism of
wowie
the
in
internet
5,
into a free
4,
market,
3,
or at least
2,
something close to it,
1.
so that people
Wow,
can
wee,
compete
wow,
with
wee, wow.
Facebook, Google, and stuff like that. And
No.
maybe Discord. Sorry, Discord.
What does your company do?
My company builds apps for communities. Think like if you have a university or something like that, you might want to have people connect and I don't know, do
Imagine
study groups or
subscribing to
date
Vacation
or
Andy
do business
Peppermods.
deals. And when you have an alumni program, a lot of the alumni are not really connecting with email. So like you went to school, you're probably not really that close with your alma mater after a few years.
Mm-hmm.
So we help them to basically re-engage people and reach out to their vast alumni network and, later tap them for money or whatever. But the main thing is letting people actually like connect in the real world as opposed to just, fading away.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
All
So
right. So what are the main things you were interested in chatting about today?
I don't know. I have a bunch of controversial views, and I thought it would be more interesting to debate something rather than just agree. So I guess I could I emailed you a bunch of them, but we could probably talk about the more controversial ones. I don't know.
Okay, hit us up. What are your more controversial ones? What's
My
your
more
most controversial one?
No, let's not start with the most controversial one. Let's just start with something interesting.
Okay.
Okay. Well, one thing in the debates, actually, I don't know what moments jumped out at you, but one moment was actually struck me. It was like Cory Booker, of all people. He started talking about his diet and factory farms. And he said, as president, I will make sure that family farms and regular people can compete with these factory farms. They don't have to become a factory farm to survive. And I thought that was pretty cool because I never expected to hear that in a presidential debate.
Wait, can you repeat the last thing again before the factory farm thing?
I just said I heard Cory Booker of all people that I wouldn't expect me to be excited by something Cory Booker says, but I was very excited to hear him say that if he becomes president, which I don't think he would, but if he becomes president, that he would do something about factory farms swallowing up all the family farms and putting people all these billions of animals into cages. So I thought that was pretty cool.
What? Okay. I thought I might have misheard this. I thought that when he was talking about this, I thought this was mainly in relation to like the veganism stuff that he was trying to like reduce global emissions. What is his like proposal? I hear people talk about like the importance of family farms and whatnot, but like are family farms actually good?
Well, I mean, family farms is what's existed throughout history, and socialists try to collectivize them, and that's one approach.
Wait,
But
hold on.
yeah.
Family farms have existed throughout history. That's not an argument for anything, right?
No, I'm not making an argument. I'm just saying, a fact.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I'm basically saying that family farms have existed, and the animals, the grandparents think that the cow is still running free, and everything like that. But if you look at the horrific conditions, like you could go to meat.org, and you could see how many of the animals are treated.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm okay with slaughtering an animal like 1 minute of pain or whatever. I understand because they would have an old age anyway. They might suffer anyway. But living their whole life, like veal, in the dark so that their meat could be good, all that kind of stuff is pretty odious, I guess. So,
Okay, wait. So are we talking about like, is this coming from then like a vegan perspective to like reduce harm among animals, or is this coming from like an environmental point of view, or what exactly are we?
it's a utilitarian perspective. It's not vegan. So I don't believe in like individuals being able to. You could shame people all day long and they wouldn't switch until the Impossible Burger arrives.
Wait,
right?
wait. When you say utilitarian, what utility? Like, what are we valuing here? What are we trying to reduce?
I guess animal suffering.
Okay, okay. So it is about animal suffering. Are if we were to raise as much as we could, on not factory farms, but on like family farms, I guess is the alternative is what we're talking about. Family farms versus factory farms. I guess like
Doesn't have to
smaller
be
scale.
family, I guess it could be a large corporation, but at least they wouldn't be putting animals into crowded conditions.
Is this actually like is this like a sustainable way to raise food? Like, is it environmentally good? Is it actually like good? Because I was under the impression that like the smaller farms or whatever ended up being like hard on the environment because they use like less efficient practices and everything. And then obviously the meat would cost more as well, or all of the animal agriculture products would be more expensive too.
Well, of course it would be more expensive. That's one of the reasons. That's one of the side effects of capitalism. A negative externality is that, you know, if you're not the customer, you're the product, right? So the animals are the product. But and you could see similar things, and I can get into this later.
Well, the animal's always the product, even in the family farms, right? Like the animal's never becoming the customer, right?
Yeah. So in the factory, sorry, in the family farms, the animals just had a much nicer life. Like, for example, 70 years ago, my grandparents, or even my mom, was like in Ukraine. I'm from Russia, and she would vacation in Ukraine. There would be chickens running around. Today, these chickens are in cages. They can't spread their wings, right? I mean, today there's two types of chickens. One is essentially bred for the meat, and one is bred for the eggs. And so the males, of course, are destroyed quickly. I'm not too upset about that. But the females are basically just I don't know. They live in their own feces a lot of the time, and they breathe toxic fumes. And it's not
sure. Yeah.
it's not
I guess my question is like, let's say that we make these more efficient farms, but it ends up making it's rougher on like our actual natural resources. Like it's usually like less environmentally friendly for the smaller farms. They end up like making less efficient use of resources of water, of land, and everything, of soil. And then let's say that the food becomes like kind of unaffordable for a lot of Americans. Do you think that's like an okay alternative if we go that route?
Well, first of all, I don't think the food should ever be unaffordable. I'm in favor of safety nets. I'm in favor of UBI. I'm in favor of a lot of different ways you could have food stamps or SNAP programs or whatever. But that's not even the point. Any way you shake it out, the human population, right, is going to have to eat. And yeah, if there's going to be more humans on the planet, there's going to be more pollution, and there's going to be more destruction of ecosystems. So really, the source of like the real root of this is like, we need to make sure that the human population doesn't exponentially grow, essentially.
Well, haven't we kind of solved, isn't exponential growth, isn't that kind of a meme? Like, we don't actually think that's going to happen anymore, right?
No, that's not necessarily true. Well, okay. I mean, this guy, Hans, I forgot his last name. Africa is set to be the new China, right? There's going to be an explosion of population because we've solved, essentially, we've solved child mortality. And this was a recent thing. So maybe 100 years ago, 120 years ago.
You're talking about Hans Rosling or whatever, right? The one dude?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly, yeah. So he talks about this a lot. He recently passed away, I believe. Look, I mean, child mortality was the check on the human population a lot of the time. People that have kids, like, you know, even
wait, wait. I don't think that's true. I think the check has usually been industrialization. That child mortality actually increased the number of kids born because people would have a ton of kids expecting some of them to die.
Well, yeah, of course. People would have a ton of kids. People had even like kings would not able to save their kids. Like Louis I'm going to say 14th, but I'm not sure. All his grandkids died except for one. And look, people weren't very good at saving their kids. And yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's why people think the average age of cavemen was low. And it's like it's because the kids were dying, and so it brings the average age down. So anyway, the bottom line is that once the kids aren't dying anymore, right? So then the society has to adjust to that new reality. In Africa, they're still adjusting because it's pretty much the last continent to really have this child mortality thing solved. And yeah, it's going to have a population explosion in the next 20, 30 years, probably.
Aren't the population rates in Africa like already tapering off pretty hard? Like I thought that as the countries became more industrialized, as women started to get like contraceptive rights and everything, that's usually what tends to curb a lot of the population growth.
Everything's tapering off. It's just, is it tapering off fast enough? So education for women, I would say, is like the #1 factor. It's good all around. So like, yeah, women going to college don't have time, right, for having kids. And if there's contraception, then they can use it. So yeah, that's probably one great solution to everything, including, look, what's happening around the world. I think this is a staggering statistic. 30% of the farmland has become desertified. Okay, however you want to define desert. And that's really staggering because this kind of thing happened in the US before the Great Depression with the Dust Bowl and everything. There was a race to the bottom. The farmers would just rape the land as much as they can in the short term, again, because capitalism, because they had to. And this is a negative externality again. But in this case, it's the land and the ecosystems with the bacteria. It can't support endless raping of the land. And so it started to blow away in dust storms. And that's why you're going to see, and the UN says, there's going to be mass migrations from Africa and from sort of those latitudes to other areas. And we can see that from Honduras as well.
Okay. What's the solution to that?
There's no the solution, but I think education for women is probably a good thing. So they have children later. And ironically, large cities, which are expensive to live in, the men don't settle down until they make enough money, right, to rent a place at least. And so that delays children further. So if you see in big metropolitan areas, that's probably where you see the least number of children and people having them later. So I don't know. I mean, I'm not very hopeful, unfortunately, but I hope it works out. I mean, I'm not very hopeful, but what else can we do but hope, you know?
Sure.
Yeah. But it is a bigger problem than we think. I mean, every problem, whether it's polluting the oceans with plastic or whether it's the CO2 in the atmosphere, goes back to one thing, the number of people, right? Every person is going to use something. And that's why it's a very important, like, variable, I guess.
Okay. So back to our original point of like co-op farms.
So co-op farms,
or I guess like or family farms or whatever, non like large corporation farms.
So like I'm not opposed to, let's say, socialism. So it's become such a loaded word, capitalism, socialism. So I want to define what I mean. Socialism without government, right? Like a libertarian type of socialism. So let me give like specific examples. A housing co-op, right, has the tenants own the corporation. They elect a board democratically. The board decides what to do, and so on. A credit union where, again, the credit union is not a bank. It's owned by sort of its own shareholders. A food cooperative, producer or consumer cooperative, and a farming cooperative. I don't see those necessarily as a bad thing. And so I understand socialism with government could be very, it could lead to bad things. But without government, I think that sometimes people prefer those kinds of organizations. And, I'm segueing into another topic that I think might be interesting to discuss.
Sure. What's the next topic?
Oh, okay. Socialism is not bad. Socialism as opposed to like capitalism, I guess. I don't know. Where do you fall on this? Can I ask you, like, what's your? Because I kind of saw a few of your debates, but you kind of allude to like not being a socialist, but also, what? So where do you fall on that, like economically? What do you think?
I guess it's going to depend on what you mean when you say socialism.
So what I mean is collective ownership of the means of production. And means of production could mean a whole variety of things. Like, I don't know, like I said, let's say a housing cooperative owning a bunch of buildings and being responsible for maintaining the grounds, like that.
Okay. I mean, I'm not necessarily against that. I like people like starting co-ops and shit, but like, what do we do with the capital that already exists?
We leave it alone and just encourage people to form co-ops, I guess.
Okay.
So like,
how would you encourage them to form co-ops?
Yeah, that's the thing. We're gonna agree on a lot of stuff. But let me make it practical. So I live in New York City. There were these two senators, Mitchell and Lama. Have you ever heard of Mitchell-Lama programs?
Nope.
Okay. So they're very famous in New York because these two senators basically said, if you build affordable housing, this was like in the 60s, you're going to get a bunch of tax breaks. Okay. And so these housing developments have been built. There's a bunch of them in Manhattan. There's some in Brooklyn. Manhattan real estate is known for being extremely expensive. Okay. I lived in one of these things about 10 years ago where, do you know how much I paid to live in a 2-bedroom apartment?
In which borough?
This was in Manhattan.
I'm going to guess $4,000 a month.
You would think. But it turns out when I first moved in, the maintenance fee was $800. Okay, this was like 15 years ago. And then it went up to a whopping $1,200 5 years later.
What is the maintenance fee? What does that mean?
Oh, sorry. That's the only fee you pay. So as a cooperator, you buy a share in the co-op. And that's all. Then you get your apartment. And then you pay for the maintenance of the property. You all collectively pay for it. And it's efficient enough that for that rent, they have wonderful parks. garages and like amenities. And of course, it's not a ritzy glitzy, you know, rental building, but where can you afford something?
Wait a second. So you paid a maintenance fee. How much did it cost you to buy in?
So for me, I didn't buy in. I was kind of subletting, but the person who bought in, typically paid around $30,000 for the shares.
Okay.
Or it might be more. It might be $60,000 for a 2-bedroom. I'm not sure.
So
and then they get the money out.
Wait, hold on. Okay, hold on. This is so fucked on so many different levels. So you had a guy that was part of a co-op who was your landlord.
Was that? Sorry, we cut out.
You had a guy that was part of a co-op, but he subleased the room to you. So he was essentially he was landlording his co-op.
Yeah, that part was the illegal part, and we can get into that stuff. There's also illegal. A lot of companies do illegal internships, which is also, I think, messed up with the minimum wage laws. But anyway, go on. Okay, yes. So forget about the sublet, but I do agree that like that was a fucked up thing. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, so what do you do with people that don't have the capital to just, you know, take out a loan for $100,000 for like an apartment to like join that kind of stuff?
That's a great question. But first I would say, what does capitalism do for those people? Well,
in capitalism, you just rent. So the owner of the property absorbs the volatility, and then you pay a premium to not have to deal with it.
Right. I just want to say one thing before I want to compare apples to apples. So if you happen to have that kind of money, would you rather be in a co-op, or would you rather, what can you really buy for $60,000 in New York City? Pretty much nothing.
You could invest your money and make money.
Sure, if you know the right investment, you could buy Bitcoin in 2012. Sure.
No, you could just buy like really broad ETFs or mutual funds or things that just track the market and make money.
Okay, but for your housing situation, it's going to be a mortgage, right? You can't really.
No, I don't have to get a mortgage. There's nothing that says I have to spend some amount of my money on a mortgage. I could just rent and then take the money I would have put in a down payment and invest that in the market.
Oh, I'm a big advocate of renting for that reason. I think that I'm not going to invest in real estate. I'm going to invest in other stuff. So I agree with you, but most people encourage home ownership. Right?
Yeah, but that's dumb as fuck. I think home ownership is a stupid idea sold to Americans. It's not good. I don't think it's a good way to build wealth or anything. Yeah.
Fuck. We agree too much. Okay, fine. But anyway, the socialism. Let's go back to this. Okay. Why do these co-ops have lines around the block? They have waiting lists for 10 years, right? There's no vacancy.
Was gonna do tier
with
4,
landlords
but for the controversial
renting
views
out
of
properties.
This
there's tons of vacancies. There's about 11% vacancies throughout the United States.
Okay?
So this is a country that makes fun of China and its ghost cities, but the vacancy rate here under capitalism is 11%, right? Not state planning, not central planning, just complete free, kind of a free market a little bit. So the co-ops aren't subject to that law. Somehow they're all 110% full. How?
Wait, what does 110% full mean?
I'm exaggerating. Yeah, sorry. So basically, people vote with their feet. And Milton Friedman's a big fan of saying people vote with their feet and they go into capitalist societies, sure. But on a smaller level, not a country level, people will vote with their feet and they often go to socialist things like co-ops for some reason. There's a waiting list. And they're doing pretty well for themselves. No one wants to leave, you know? That's significant.
That when people get into co-ops, they don't want to leave?
Right, they don't want to leave, except for
Isn't that just because the value is appreciating the same way that if somebody were to own real estate, they wouldn't want to sell it?
No, I'm saying that there's all these apartments, right? Let's say there's two apartment buildings next to each other.
Okay.
One's a condo and one is a cooperative.
Okay.
Right? So what I'm saying is that the vacancy rate, the way that the actual physical thing is utilized far more and for far less money per tenant than the other building. So if you leave these two buildings alone and you let reality...
Wait, how is it? I don't understand how it's far less money. Where do these savings come from?
I guess the profit motive for one thing. In some markets, prices go up because, let's say, land is scarce. In other areas...
Wait, hold on. I'm super confused. What do you mean by the profit motive? If somebody builds a house or a building and they sell it to either a cooperative or they sell it to a private owner, there's still a profit motive there either way, right?
Right, but then after they're done and they leave, these two organizations are run completely differently, right?
Not really. Are they?
Yeah, they are. The co-op doesn't really have a profit motive. I wouldn't be surprised if it would be a non-profit corporation.
Well, I mean, it's non-profit by definition because the profits are passed out to the members of the co-op, right?
Yeah, most cooperatives are just non-profits.
The scat
de
man.
facto. Yeah.
Yeah, so this was like, this was a big criticism that Marx made, that this idea that if you just take the actual like means of production and you just give it to the workers, but you don't actually change the way the economy is planned, like it's not really a socialist thing, right? Like there's still all the same profit motives and everything attached to it. It's just now the workers are making the profits, but it's still like all like driven like as a profit motive, right? Like the co-op wants to be successful, the co-op wants to make money. Like the co-op, for instance, isn't going to vote for policies. Like let's say that it comes time for the board to vote. They're not going to vote on things that are going to lower the overall value of the entire property, right?
Well, the co-op wants to make money from outside people, but they're not going to try to make money from their own members. That's the point. And one other example to bring it home.
Wait,
you know,
but that's true. That's true of landlords as well. They don't want to make money off of themselves. They want to make money from other people. And a co-op doesn't want to make money off of themselves. They want to make money off of other people.
Exactly. I think we're saying the same thing. Who is themselves? So in a co-op, themselves is actually the whole group of tenants voting with a representative democracy, right? So they have a say and a voice in how the co-ops run. With the landlord building, it's take it or leave it. If you don't like it, go to some other landlord, right?
Yeah, I guess, but it's just like in order to get into the co-op, the only way to do that is you have to like have the upfront capital to actually buy a share of it. So it's kind of similar to just being a capitalist, right? Like in some ways, like if you don't actually change the mode of production, right? Like what Marx would say that when capitalism fails, like the actual modes of production need to change, not just who owns the means of production. That if you have people that are able to buy these large shares of a co-op to make profit, it's a capital investment, except you do it into a co-op and then you make money off of it. Much the same way that a landlord makes a capital investment into a property and makes money off of it. Like co-ops are interesting ideas. I don't think they're bad, but they have requirements for large upfront capital investments that aren't going to help like poor people, right? You'd have to go to a bank and take a loan out or some crazy shit like that, right?
They're not, well, they might help poor people in the short run, but and again, this is like Richard Wolff talks a lot about socialist structures, right? And he advocates for democracy at work, at corporations. And while I'm sympathetic to that, I don't think that's a good solution. I think both socialism and capitalism are kind of outdated ways to sort of help poor people. And I can get into that. I think that might be a good next topic. But my point is, yeah, you're right. The cooperative or any socialist system is just collectively owned. So people are sucking the teat of whatever gains automation or whatever will come of that organization. But once they move, they become an immigrant, right? And we all know what happens with immigrants. They get hazed. They have to go through these like waiting processes. And then, yeah, so like when you're the new guy, you're not benefiting from socialism. I totally agree. You're only benefiting if you're grandfathered into the system.
Okay, so what's like the solution to this? How do you help poor people?
Okay, so if you're asking about what I think my quote unquote ideal society would be, my ideal society would be less ownership in general, meaning like open source, there's no intellectual property, almost no intellectual property. And then there is also UBI.
Wait, I'm curious. So let's go by these one at a time. So you said no IP at all. How do you get companies to invest in like big projects if they're not going to make any money off of it?
You don't have to. What I'd like to see is, again, voluntary. What I'd like to see is, you know how, okay, so we've seen this in software. In the 90s, there was a lot of closed source software by Microsoft and others, Apple.
Okay.
Then open source software came along. And again, it didn't use government at all. It simply was, in the long run, better. It took off. It was worse. Linux
Wait, how
was
is
worse.
open software better?
It took over. Everybody right now uses open source software without even knowing it.
Wait, how many people use open source cell phone stuff or open source desktops or open source like games or open like?
This might be surprising, but everyone. So let's go down the line. WebKit powers Safari as well as Chrome.
Oh, Android is open source, gotcha. Still proprietary though, but sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So like Android, you named it. Like Linux, obviously on the desktop is like less. People like to have nice glitzy things, but like on server side, I mean, the entire internet is like powered by Apache. WordPress powers 30% of all websites. Nginx is another nice server. The point is, yes, open source has completely eaten a large portion of it, and there didn't have to be any government. That's what technology does. But here's the big thing. It has to be redistributed to everybody. It can't be holed up in Microsoft's server farm, you know?
Sure. Aren't there still like isn't a lot of software, like really important software today, still like closed source though, or still like proprietary? Like,
I would say bleeding edge stuff is, but then quickly open source kind of absorbs it into like
well, like
its
let's say
own.
we look at, so like my industry is video games, right? Like, have there ever been like successful open source video games?
No, actually, video games are surprisingly resilient. I remember I was like 10, 15 years ago. I used to build 3D engines, and there was this. You probably heard about it, Crystal 3D or something like that. But I'm sure if you go down the stack far enough, pretty much everything in video games is open source, like C++, compilers, and what have you.
Well,
you
but
know?
that's a little reductive. Just because like certain libraries are open doesn't mean that the programs itself are open source, right?
I'm saying if you consider all the code that's ever been written to power your game, then probably 90% of it is actually open sourced by now.
Okay.
So that's IP. And again, I don't want to just dwell on open source. I'll give you 5 concrete examples besides open source. Okay. The other is science. Okay. That's been going on for hundreds of years. Okay. The guys like Newton, he said, if I looked further, if I saw further, it's because I was standing on the shoulders of giants. That was a bit of a pun by Newton, actually, his contemporaries. But the point is, the giants didn't rent their shoulders to him like pharma companies, right? They wouldn't say, oh, we have a patent, Newton, and you can't just simply, go ahead and invent the calculus, and you can't invent, Kepler didn't take his laws of planetary motion and like try to make a profit off them. So throughout history, scientists have contributed not because of a profit motive, but because they got sort of a UBI, like a stipend from their colleges. And yeah, so they were free to actually contribute. So back to answer your question, who is going to invest in this? Everyone's going to invest a little part. No one's freedom is chilled to like create a drug to like, cure malaria, because they're not going to have the patent police like knock down their door and say, oh, you helped a lot of these people, but this idea is very similar to an idea that's already been patented,
Okay.
So as you could tell, I'm against patents, but I'm sympathetic to copyright. Like I think at least with copyright, if I make a book that's like 95% similar to your book, at least that can be shown. But if I have an idea, just an idea, and you say, oh, by the doctrine of equivalence, which is the United States, my idea is very similar to your idea, so you got to pay me now. It's like, come on, dude, you don't own ideas, So, even libertarians, a lot of the anarcho-capitalist libertarians I speak to are against patents. They're against intellectual property. So that's actually another example is Wikipedia. So there was a time when Encarta and Britannica were like the top of the line. They were great. They were big capitalist enterprises. Britannica was sold door to door by salesmen. But now who talks about Britannica? Who looks things up in Britannica? It's like, boom, 20 years later, Wikipedia took over and it's got more articles. It's got a long tail of just content upon content. And what's the economics of it? You tell me. Who profits off of Wikipedia, right?
Yeah, I mean, Wikipedia is all open source. I don't know if that's so much open source winning versus it being like a technological thing, but sure.
I think those are intertwined. I think as technology improves, there's going to become more and more opportunities to either distribute it to all the people or for people to just kind of lock it up in their castle. Like when a printer was invented, the desktop printer, right? You could just simply think about that. Just think about printing. I mean, we could go on and on with phones, but let's say printing. How many people were able to use printing for whatever they want? They could print porn. They could print seditious literature. At the beginning, governments were like, wait a second, you're supposed to get like letters patent. You're supposed to get a permission to print on a print, what is it called? Lithograph or whatever. Dude, now people could just do this. And the same thing will happen with guns, man. The same thing will happen to everything else. People will just simply 3D print everything that they want. And it's going to happen on the web as well. So what my company does is instead of, what do you do right now if you want to stream? You use Discord, I guess. Or what do you use actually to stream?
It's an open source program. It's called OBS.
Oh, well, there you go. So you're ahead of the game. But a lot of people would just like, if I want to collaborate on a document, I'm going to use Google Docs. What else? Like literally, what would you use? Dropbox? So it's always you're in the process of like step 1, pick a landlord. Step 2, hope that they have your interests at heart. And like, if they don't, then you get like Cambridge Analytica or, oh, Facebook subverted our democracy, maybe, or they help someone. It's like this crap. And then Congress passes laws. Like last year, they passed Sesta Fosta, which was a law that said that it was a very well-meaning law. It said pornography of children should not be on the internet. And if you're operating, say, Craigslist, you're responsible for taking it off. And you know who came out against this? You would think, who would come out against the law against child pornography? It was the EFF, the Electronic Frontier Foundation. I think even I'm not sure the Civil Liberties Union, but like, why? They said, how can you possibly police everything? It's too big. Facebook's too big. They're going to mess it up. And you're going to chill free speech, right? Well, here's the thing. Why are they too big? Why are these communities hiring people to translate from Hindi so they can see if they should ban a post? It's ridiculous. Hindi, so in India, they should have their own open source network for like the village, right? For example.
Okay.
Right? Okay. So there's no reason why if you want to date someone in your village, the signal should go to California and like the NSA will like look at everything. There's no reason for that inefficient. And by the way, this is also contributing to fossil fuels, is like all that energy of pushing the bits around the world for absolutely no fucking reason, only because in capitalism, or at least the intellectual property version of it, Facebook will not release its backend software to anybody. Right? So you can't run your own thing. So what my company does is it basically builds open source versions of Facebook. So you can run, so you can have a village without good Wi-Fi, without good internet, and still, you know, have doctor's appointments and shit. And this is very important. So around the world, right now, in the last month, there was in Kashmir, India cut off their internet. So you see stories like, oh, a pharmacy can't order drugs anymore, and now people are running out of the drugs, right? Because everything's online, and they're addicted to like a good internet connection to like Europe for some reason, because that's where the servers are, right? ZocDoc or whatever. And then you could also see in Hong Kong, you'll see this in the next month, like China will, I'm sure, try to mess with the internet of Hong Kong at some point. So it's like, what do they use? So the Hong Kong protesters used FireChat, which is a peer-to-peer mesh networking software, which no one can block. So that's, in my opinion, the future, a future where governments and large corporations have no power to block communications, energy production, pretty much anything. That would be really, so again, I'm sort of a left libertarian, as you can tell from this. I want things to be distributed to everybody, but I don't want concentration of power in the hands of a few. So, yeah. Okay.
What's like a major policy proposal, I guess, but where would you start with this kind of stuff?
UBI would be a great start. Reducing the 40-hour work week to a 30-hour work week gradually would be a great start. I'm a bit of a social conservative, despite my, I guess, redistributionist in economics, but socially, I think the stuff that we've been doing in the last 50 years to 100 years often leads, we're painting ourselves into corners that we've never tried before, and they're not really great corners in some respects. So, for example, we're going to work for corporations, we commute like miles per day, like tens of miles, which is ridiculous, wasting fossil fuels. And then people wonder, how are we polluting the atmosphere? Well, you're commuting to your job every day, whereas like in the past, you wouldn't have a job to sit in a chair 30 miles away. And then it's even worse than that. So adults are now medicating themselves. There's an opioid epidemic, unfortunately. Women, 1 in 4 middle-aged women are on antidepressants. Then they're putting their kids into a public school, so the public school can educate them to work in a corporation. And the public school, also the system kind of medicates their kids because the kids can't sit still, but they're told to shut up for 10 hours a day and sit down and shut up. So they get the ADHD now. It's like overprescribed. Oh no, there's a giant explosion in ADHD diagnosis. And then the elderly are probably a lot of the time in nursing homes. Not everybody, but a lot of the time, if both parents have to work, you don't have time to raise your kids and see their first, words or whatever. That happens with quote unquote professionals, right? And so your parents can be seen after by professionals. I don't even know what they're getting medicated over there. So the whole society's medicated. Okay, this is looking like USSR in like 80s with everyone's like drunk and vodka, right? Because something's wrong. Something's wrong. And I think what is wrong is that Well, so how do you unravel this thing? So like there's so many ways you can improve education. You can flip the classroom, right? You can have a 30-hour work week so that the parents could actually spend some more time with their family, right? That would be nice. Have a UBI. But in order for all that to happen, we need people to stop thinking like people are getting stuff they don't deserve. You know, it's like, oh, this 47% of moochers, including children and elderly, are getting like, they're getting our money, my hard-earned dollars. And it's like, dude, you live in the 21st century. You get the last like 20 centuries of progress and freedom and
less than 3
like technology. Those guys are dead. You're not compensating those guys, right? So just by being born in a certain time, it's already a free gift. You didn't earn this gift, right? So why are you so stingy with like, okay, you're born in the right place in the right time, but someone else was born somewhere else. Oh, they don't deserve it, man. They don't deserve free stuff, but I deserve like to be born in the 21st century. It's like, you know, I get it. It's not the same because it's like an action on your part that you're taxed, but like, well, I'm just basically saying it's the mentality of it's my hard-earned money. If we can get over that and have a 30-hour work week and the UBI and everything like that, and then we could eliminate IP, then I think we would have a society with much more innovation, people taking care of their kids, and frankly, much better health outcomes and much better everything outcomes, in my opinion.
Okay. Are you a big supporter of Yang for the UBI stuff?
Let's just say I built Yang2020.app. How about that?
Okay. Damn. Okay.
I don't think he's gonna win though. Just so you know.
Do you have who do you think is gonna win?
Oh man, I think Bernie's gonna win. Look, I this may sound sexist, but if Warren drops out, not because she's a woman, but if she drops out, she shares so much of her votes with Bernie that he's just gonna be the front runner. I don't know if they're planning to do that later on, or maybe he's gonna drop out and she's gonna win. But like, they together are basically the progressive wing of the party, and whoever stays in is going to win, in my opinion.
Gotcha. Wait, what does her being a woman have to do with any of that?
Because a lot of the time when you say things like that, there's always this question: oh, are you saying why should she drop out? Maybe Bernie should drop out. That kind of thing. But look, Bernie planted the grass.
Mm-hmm.
He waited. If she had entered in 2016, then she would be the one, right, to plant all that grass. But he planted the grassroots. He's always been consistent. And so like, who are my favorite guys is like Ron Paul, Bernie Sanders, and Andrew Yang. Andrew Yang's a bit of a oddball out, but like Bernie Sanders and Ron Paul are basically the same guy on different sides of like slightly different sides. They're both consistent. They're both like congressmen for 30 years. And that's not sexy. The reason the media ignored them is not because there's a corporate conspiracy to ignore them. It's just they're not. Okay, Bernie Sanders says the same thing again, that we all should live very well and that we should have universal health care. Like, yeah, there's nothing new about him. So I think what Bernie should do is that he should have celebrities coming out like on a timed basis. Like Cardi B comes out, some guy comes out. Like, they could be his like cool factor, because he's just not cool.
Yeah.
And one last thing is that you gotta really stand up and take notice when a guy who's old and not cool draws tons and tons of young people out, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I am very much for, like, people say they don't like populism. Like, what do you feel about populist candidates?
I'm not a big fan of it, but
yeah, I'm not a big fan of populism in general, but one aspect of populism is that the crowd has a point, right? This is the collective experience of people that are, like I said, on opiates and like really losing jobs a lot of the time and like facing a new economy. Who speaks to that is Andrew Yang this time around, right? I'm okay with Bernie having a jobs guarantee. That may last another 8 years, maybe. That's pretty good. But in the end, it's just inevitable that we're going to need a UBI or less kids or both.
Mm-hmm.
And socialism is a temporary stopgap. And even guys like Tucker Carlson are actually like, I saw Tucker Carlson on Ben Shapiro, and he's like, yeah, why do you blame people for becoming socialists? Like, their jobs are being eliminated. Like, So he wrote a book about, but he's a Luddite. He thinks you got to stop technology. Like, no, you have to embrace technology, and you have to just make sure that people get unconditional money, because they're not going to have enough. Demand for human labor is going to go down. It's eventually going to happen. And what are you going to do at that point? You're going to move in with your roommates, with your parents? Like, that's not too bad, I guess, but you know.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so what do you think? I don't want to hear myself just talk. Has anything that I've said rubbed you the wrong way, or?
I mean, there's a lot of interesting ideas. I don't really know where to go with any of it.
Okay, yeah. See, this is the thing. I'm like, I call myself a techno-libertarian. Guys like Andrew Yang speak to people like me, right? Because they talk about, look at all the robots. Look what Amazon's doing. Look what McDonald's is doing, right? Look at all the robots that can cook. That's an example. Most people today, like Bernie, God bless him, but he's like living, you know, he's a socialist living. He's not really, he's a Democrat. He's a social democrat.
Sure.
But, you know, he erroneously calls himself a socialist. But anyway, socialism is not going to save us, and capitalism is going to just rot. It's just going to become worse and worse. Like kind of like the Indian dream of the Brahman, which just becomes worse and worse until the Brahman wakes up. You know, that's Hinduism. I think that's what's going to happen with capitalism, where it's like, you got to have UBI, man. You got to have unfettered like innovation, and take care of your kids. I don't know. I don't think I'm saying anything that objectionable. So it's hard to have a debate when I don't know. I guess let me argue for something very controversial. I got 10 minutes. I gotta.
Okay.
Or maybe I can come on another time and do this again. I don't know. What do you think?
Maybe, I will see.
All right. Okay. You might want to argue against this one. Polygamy. Okay. I think that we should legalize polygamy.
I don't know. I'd have to think a lot about the implications of that one. That's a dramatically reforged family structure. Would like multiple men be allowed to be married to one woman, or is this like this multiple women to one man, or how does that work? So, but I guess, look, I mean, socially and legally, I think it should be allowed that both men and women should be legally allowed. I think consenting adults, again, as a libertarian, they should have the right to do whatever they want, whatever arrangement they want. Marriage shouldn't be overseen by state licenses and everything. Oh, yeah. Well, that's because my question was going to be about like the tax shit, because getting married is like pretty preferential for tax status if there's a differential in income. Right. Well, if you talk to a libertarian leaning person, they're just going to say, you know, who cares? Like the taxes. Why is the state involved in marriage? Sure. Well, I don't think that's that controversial. If we get rid of all like tax incentives or whatever for married people, then yeah, whoever wants to get married and get married, fuck it. Yeah. Okay, cool. Fuck. Can't debate you anything. Okay. Well, let me controversial take. My controversial take is that polygamy is natural because throughout history, we have twice as many female ancestors as we have male ancestors. This can be verified genetically because men used to kill each other. Men would literally tribes would fight, and any tribe that sacrificed women and children would be really dumb because men can repopulate the next generation, right? It goes back to biology. Like women can have one, maybe two kids at a time for 9 months, and then they have to like breastfeed them and wean them and everything. Men, like if 90% of your guys die in war, you're still fine. You're completely fine. But it's like 90% of your women die. That's really stupid. So we always we protect women and children. It's not just the patriarchy or whatever. It's literally like groups that didn't protect women and children are not around. It's just evolution. Okay. So men in their genes, I think, are more promiscuous, like at least in their mindset, right? And again, this is just evolutionarily. Women don't need to be so promiscuous because they just need, forgive me, they need to be someone to impregnate them. They have a child, right? They reproduce. A man has to get a woman to impregnate, but they fight, they die for their tribe. And then they're used to having a lot of women. And by the way, you don't have to go back history very much. After World War II, the country I came from, Russia, right, USSR, had 30 million people dead, right? And most of those were men.
I could be wrong about that, but you can always test. If people die in war, if men die, it's usually war, if it's disproportionately men.
Mhm.
If they equally die, then it was probably a siege of a city or some sort of like atrocity.
Okay.
Okay. So that's actually a very helpful way to know what happened. So if men died in war, which is what I think happened, what do you think happened? Like, you can paper it up and pretty it up all you want. Men were having sex with a lot of women after that war, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because women would prefer that. They wouldn't want to be celibate for the rest of their life, you know? So yeah, I think polygamy is like entrenched in human history. And today you could see polygamy in Muslim societies a lot of the time, also sometimes in Hindu, Indian societies. So like in Muslim societies, like, but here's the thing, right? Polygamy, for it to work, there has to be more violence also. So I don't think it's necessarily, although look, Europe was very violent until the 20th century. So there's many factors. I'm not going to say there's one factor, but the natural state of man is to have polygamy and kill other men. And now we live in a world that's only, what, 50 years old or 100 years old? That's not happening. And that's why I think men are a little bit like, what are we doing? Like, why am I feeling a little bit like I don't have enough or something, or I'm not satisfied? And I think that we're going to have to either adjust our psyche to the new reality, but our brains are still like, I think still, you know, there's enough genetics to make men think, oh, I'm kind of me horny, you know? So yeah, I don't know. Okay. How about this? Here's a controversial take. If what we have in the Muslim societies, we actually have in Western Christian
Thanks, buddy, for streaming.
societies. We have in Western societies. So Christians had the disestablishment, the separation of church and state. And they were able to do that better than Muslims because Christian books are essentially written by a powerless sect. So they don't have any prescriptions for laws and state things. Whereas like Muhammad was pretty powerful towards the end, and he was able to put in a bunch of like laws and how to run courts and stuff. So Christians are able to sort of divorce their government more easily because there's less in the books that they'll have to like, you know, to contend with. And so they're basically secular. But then what happens is you've got two groups. You've got before marriage and after marriage. So like, you're not married, right?
Not currently, no.
Okay. So I would wager to say that you're no stranger to this. Before marriage, some guys get a lot of women and some guys get hardly any women, right?
Okay.
And I guess you could call it guys and girls, like if they're younger. So, okay. So like I think
Make
that's,
it stop being tiny.
I bet if you looked at the statistics, the curve would look exactly like in polygamous societies.
What is that, where like 20% of the guys are getting like 80% of the women or something?
Yeah, basically. Yeah, the Pareto thing.
Okay.
So, but then once you get married, see, that's when the stability comes in, right? The society favors marriage because, well, first of all, because there's less people that are frustrated. And, see, we got to do this again because I got to go soon. But like, then I'm going to talk about incels, and I'm going to talk about how in the Muslim world, also a lot of people who join ISIS are actually celibate. Like before they join ISIS, they join for the and it's a big thing, and people don't talk about it. But like, yes, who ends up committing a lot of the violence? Let me be clear. I'm not saying if you're an incel, you're going to commit violence. Rather, the other way. If you look at a lot of the mass murders that have been happening, it is done by incels. And again, I would like to change society. I'd like to make society so that we don't sit on our computers all day long. And no offense, I do it as well. It used to be that you had a village. You know, you didn't have to commute 30 miles to work. The Amazon guy didn't come by with the package, and you had a 1 second interaction. You didn't order food in. You know, you actually like. There was no cell phones. There was no Facebook. Like, you actually had to call somebody up and talk to them, you know, and meet with them. And before the phone, like, people actually had to meet in person. And a lot of the times, I'm gonna maybe end with this, and like, you tell me what you think. A lot of the times, a lot of this stuff with like pickup artists, or like, how do I talk to this girl, or like, oh, I have this anxiety, approach anxiety, how do I talk to this girl? Here's the thing, you don't. Like, throughout human history, you do not talk to the girl. Like the phone is what changed it. You can actually, like, you'd have to go into her village, win over her family, not get killed, like not get run out of the village. You have a reputation. The phone is what changed it. So now, like, you get her digits and suddenly, like, you can call her. And it used to be like, when I was growing up in the 90s, there was no cell phones. So you have to talk to her mom, right? You have to talk to her family. Now it's even like, dude, like like the next decade you talk on the phone, and the next decade is like, you don't even talk, you just text, like, LOL, you know, I'll call you, like, whatever. And it's like, dude, that's what I mean by being a conservative, is that I don't think the society is getting into a healthy place, living on their own. Everyone's on their own, depressed, getting Amazon deliveries. Like, don't get me wrong, I like Amazon. I'm just saying there needs to be more human contact. And I think we're losing that, and we're sticking our kids into public school, and we're working for corporations, like long hours. Unless something changes, like UBI or 30-hour work week or anything, it's going to be a Red Queen theory. You're just going to, people are going to work longer hours because they're not going to have enough money to pay for rent. They're going to stick their kids into like preschool kindergartens, and like, I don't know. I don't see it getting any better under capitalism, in my opinion.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. All right, dude. I don't know. I kind of expected it to be a little bit contentious. Like, I don't know. I don't know how it works usually, to be honest with you. Is this going anywhere? Is this like on?
I mean, it might be better to have like one like focus topic maybe in the future, I guess. I mean, I guess like broadly, there's like a lot of stuff to tangle with, but
that's true. All right, dude. Well, maybe next time I'll like come up with a topic that we can cover. But anyway, I just want to say I really respect a lot of the takedowns that you do of conservatives, or what I've seen on YouTube. I imagine that's like 1% of what you do, because, you know, it's only a few videos and you do this all the time, I guess. So what exactly is this? Like, what do you stream and then you just have somebody call in and like you question them, or like what?
Well, I don't know. It just depends on what's going on. But every now and then, I just kind of gamble and I pull on a random guy that emails me and says he wants to talk about a ton of things, and that's what we did today. So, yeah. Nah,
that's awesome. Well, I guess I feel pretty good. You're not gonna put up a video saying Destiny destroys, Greg, with all those topics, right?
No, I don't think so. Hopefully not. I don't do any of my YouTube channel, but I don't think that'll happen. So.
All right. Hey, yeah, okay. Last thing, can I get like a link to whatever this, like, if this goes on YouTube or whatever? Can I like see it?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it'll go up, but if it does, I'll try to send it to you. Okay.
Yeah, man.
All right.
All right. Sounds good. All right. Have a good weekend.
Yep. Have a good one.
All right. Bye.
So like the hit, whatever's hitched behind you can go a different way than when you came in, I guess. Yeah, I'm not sure. Wait, Destiny, that's not true at all.